Okay, so I want to get into one of the really important concepts in our programming, what makes our program a little bit different, and really what I'm listing as one size fits none. So this idea that, you know, the best thing for everybody to do for fat loss is high intensity interval training. The best thing for, you know, X, Y, and Z is this. The reality is there's some factors that are really important to consider when you're working with a client or when you're joining a program or facility, and this is part of our initial assessment process, and this is how we decide how we're going to write programs, how we're going to do conditioning, what's the best thing for this person, rather than just throwing everybody in a bucket. Because a lot of times what we see is people are deconditioned, they're out of shape, they join a challenge or boot camp or something like that, and inevitably, best case scenario, they don't necessarily get very good results. Worst case scenario, they get hurt, they break down, they bounce back even worse, they actually gain weight, they can't continue it. All kinds of bad things happen. I'm sure people have similar stories from that kind of thing. So let's start over here. So the important thing to recognize here, when we look at these different categories, none of these talk about like BMI or body fat or muscle mass, because the reality is those things are more not really directly correlated with this. This is really what we're dealing with here when we're talking about this, is somebody's actual ability, capacity to do work, to train. So you can be a low body fat or have some decent muscle mass and still fall into what we would call the deconditioned category. So it's important to recognize that just because maybe you're a little bit what you consider overweight does not mean that you're automatically in the lowest category, and that's important. So starting over here on the right, if we get somebody coming into the gym, that is what we would call, I'm going to use a category named deconditioned, the appropriate thing to do for them. And this deconditioned person, high resting heart rate, you know, 65, 70, 75, 80, that kind of thing. High blood pressure, obviously blood pressure is one of those, if it's too high, we need to refer out to a doctor, or at least be aware, their doctor needs to be aware of this. That's probably where they got the information. We don't generally take blood pressure. Other factors, you know, high stress, tired, lethargic, pre-diabetic would be another one that would fall in that category. So with them, somebody in this case, and this is a lot of people that come into the facility, though not as many, because I think the thing I'm really confident in is that people would be much more successful that are in this, because this is the vast majority of people at New Year's that are joining a program. Honestly, unfortunately, it's the vast majority of Americans at this point. They would be much more successful if they understood this, and the process would be a lot easier, a lot more productive, and a lot less painful for this type of client. So the goal with this type of client is we want to increase their capacity, their ability to do work. So we're focusing primarily on their aerobic conditioning, their variety of movements they can do. We're going to trying to get the warning lights down. So we want to get the resting heart rate is something we're going to check. Blood pressure. You know, we're not necessarily going to do blood sugar. Just improvements in overall, you know, non-specific factors. I feel better. I feel like I can do more work. That kind of thing. We want to groove patterns. So it's a good time. Generally, these people are not going to be great at, you know, squat, lunge, push-up, press, pull. So we're going to use this time in a low, you know, one of my issues with boot camps is if somebody hasn't done a ton of squats, for instance, in a long time, if you throw a lot of volume on not a great pattern or a lot of load, bad things are going to happen. So we're going to use this opportunity to groove patterns, to get them repetitions under not a ton of load and not you know, extremely high heart rates or extremely stressful conditions, to what I would say open the aperture. I want them, when they get to the next level, I want them to have a nice wide variety of movement they can engage in. Obviously, we're not even talking in this really about movement quality, movement productivity, that kind of fun stuff. We're strictly talking about their ability to do work, which is actually the definition of the word fitness. So their program, what I call turtle mode, and turtle mode because slow and steady wins the race. They can go pretty often, you know, 4 to 6 times a week. I'm going to recommend that. A lot of what I would call low intensity, steady state conditioning work. Long walks, brisk walks, great. Get these people active, get them moving. Their training program is going to be a lot of circuits, but not circuits in a boot camp sense or some of the class-based programs, Orange Theory, F45. We're not trying to kill them in a circuit. I'm just using that to keep their heart rate elevated at a reasonable level so they can get in some of these other patterns. So going to failure, burning out, all that kind of stuff, it doesn't matter at this stage. And we're not even talking about the diet side here or the lifestyle side. those elements alone, combined with this, are gonna get us not necessarily, massive, insane weight loss right away. It's not instant gratification, because the reality is, even if your body fat's where you wanna be, this is a problem as a human being. You don't wanna be over here. So we have to fix this regardless. This is the best way to do it. So as we move along here, and we get over into the goal dependent, this person is in our target heart range, so they're 55, 65, somewhere around there, resting heart rate. They've got pretty good aerobic capacity. They've got a good movement menu, so they can do most of the normal movement, squat, lunge, push up, pull up, all that fun stuff. Over here in this range, this is where a lot of our clients are, or most of them are all the time. It is strictly goal dependent. So what they're gonna do is whatever the best approach for the specific goal they have. So if it's hypertrophy, we're gonna use more of a hypertrophy-based approach, a little bit higher volume, maybe less recovery times, depends on what phase they're in. Fat loss, obviously, we're gonna add some more, again, more additional conditioning elements. We're gonna modify a few things. We're gonna try to keep the time under tension a little bit higher. Strength, longer rest periods, heavier weights. Performance, this is where most of our athletes fit in. So obviously we're considering power exercise, the implications for that. We're considering the different movements required for their sport. So this is where a lot of our people live, and they're in that good range. And the reason, the programming, I said pudding proof. The proof is just gonna be in the pudding. The only way we're evaluating this person is based on their goal. If they have a hypertrophy goal, if they want to get bigger, we're going to measure it, and did they get bigger every 4 weeks? If not, we're going to modify the program to address why that's happening. For fat loss, did they lose body fat? Did they lose inches? Is that working? Do we need to modify it? Again, it's just about testing and retesting. It's not about fighting about the science. It's about finding the right thing to use for that person based on typical protocols for those type of things. Strength, obviously we want to see improvements in strength. Performance numbers, did their vertical jump go up? Did their sport performance increase? All that great stuff. And finally, the last category over here, I've got the elite category. These are our crazy low heart rate people. They've got great recovery, good lifestyle, and they're maybe in like high output sports. So you're powerlifting, sprinting, explosive positions in sport, football, linemen. The goal at this point for these people, long drive would be high output. The goal for these people is neural improvement. So we're no longer, they've made all their aerobic, their tissue is about as functionally aerobically as it can possibly get. They are highly conditioned. What you want to avoid with this elite person is just because they can doesn't mean they should. They can do anything you throw at them. If you are one of these people, don't fall into the trap of just being, I'm gonna run triathlons and do CrossFit and enter a powerlifting contest and do all this other stuff, because you're gonna end up hurt. Because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. We're trying to make neural change. We're trying to improve their body's ability to generate force at certain angles and certain patterns. The brain, the central nervous system, needs to recover longer than the body does aerobically. So the high quality reps, high efficiency reps, high power output is our biggest challenge with this person over here. We're looking at max output, long rest. I call the program Yoda mode. Yoda just kind of like hangs out. When he does go, it's crazy, intense, explosive. There's no rest. So there's specific conditioning modalities over here we want to live in too. If we're training for a specific sport, we want to be really specific with the conditioning we're going to do here. So again, I hope this is a good message. Spinning back over, this is my good side. This is a good message for not only prospective clients, people out there working out on their own, other coaches. Take this into account, because one size fits none. If your programming looks the same for everybody, if you're running classes, or if you're doing classes, boot camps, all that other stuff, consider that you have all three of these people in your class. It's too hard for this person. They don't belong there. They're going to burn out. They're going at a way too high of a heart rate given what they're walking in at. You may even be putting yourself at risk liability-wise. The goal-dependent people, if they're in a boot camp or a class, unless their goal is to be good at that boot camp or class, are probably not getting any of these other things, though, like maybe fat loss, they may accidentally work into that, though it's probably still not the best. And this elite person over here is just doing it because they can, but they're really not moving the needle in the direction they want to move in. They're just basically going through the motions, and what they're going to tend to do is do something too aggressively and potentially get risk for injuries. So big implications in program. We'll deep dive more into programming as we go along. but I think hopefully this help explains our thought process and physiologically what you should be thinking about from a conditioning standpoint.